signed Jalen Waddle to a new 3-year extension worth almost $85 million. Last year, Waddle had his third straight 1,000-yard season, along with 4 touchdowns. That's not that many, but here's the most guaranteed money power rankings for a wide receiver. A.J. Brown at 84, Amon-Ra St. Brown at 77, Waddle at 76, Cooper Kupp 75, and then another Dolphin, Tyreek Hill at 72. Here working for free for us, courtesy of 670 The Score, is Danny Parkins. But we're going to start with you, Brew. Are the Dolphins contenders?
I mean, sure. If you're going to play a tomato can in 80-degree weather every time in the playoffs, sure. Then you can be contenders. I mean, what are we talking about? No. Now, first of all, Tua, who we're not certain is a star.
I'm certain he's not, but sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we do have to acknowledge there also still is a health concern with him. He's been healthy 1 out of 4 seasons. So that's just one. All right. But we've seen this graphic before, but here it is again. This is Tua and by extension the Dolphins against playoff teams. Last year they were 1-6, and it's not just the record. Look at the numbers. His numbers dropped drastically.
Across
And that one win was against the Dallas Cowboys.
300 yards a game to 227, 230, whatever.
The passer rating's crazy.
Passer rate. Look at the TD to interception ratio. And here's the other thing. A lot of people thought their defense, there was a lot of talk at the end of last season or late last season, oh, the defense is stepping up under Fangio. That's because they were playing tomato cans. When they played the playoff teams, they gave up 32 points a game. So they got big names on defense. But are they really ready to be a championship-level defense? So those are all my concerns. I love the offense. You know, it's exciting. It's fun. But defensively and Tua, I got questions about, so no, not a contender.
Okay.
See, I say they are contenders. Now, part of this is because it's May, and I want to believe that there are more than 5 contenders in the AFC, and they have the 6th best Super Bowl odds of any team in the AFC. So I'd like to believe the teams in that range are contenders. They scored the most points of any team in the AFC last year. And you
A lot of that was because of the 70. But
I know you say the 70 helped. And you say tomato cans, that's definitely true. Those numbers don't lie. But also, that playoff game, they were devastated by injury at the end of the season. Look at the number of starters. I'm not saying they would have won that game at Arrowhead if these guys were healthy. But that is their entire
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Kind of are.
No,
Kind of are. I mean, you're not saying it, but that's crap.
How can we say the players don't matter? Like, again, I'm not saying who would have won that game if those players all played, but how can we act like injuries don't matter? Like, if they had literally like players that were just they were signing off the street. If players and personnel don't matter, then why do we pay hundreds of millions of dollars for all of these players? Why? What are we saying here? Why do we always scoff at that? I mean, not we. Don't include me, because it matters. Like, the media always wants to act like, well, that doesn't matter. You gotta find a way to win. What an absurd statement to make. Okay, so would the Chiefs won the Super Bowl if Pacheco, Travis Kelce, and Rice were all missing for the Super Bowl? You gotta find a way. Like, what are we saying here? If we took 4 starters off of the Chiefs' defense, would they have beat the 49ers? Because the answer is no. Once you get in the playoffs, the margin of error is so slim, okay? Where these have profound impacts. So I love how we always just want to toss out and say, well, that doesn't matter. Those injuries don't matter. We only say that injuries matter if it's to, like, a big name player. And even then, we only pick and choose when we want. A.J. Brown didn't play for the Eagles. Well, that doesn't matter. Jalen Hurts dislocated his finger. Well, that doesn't matter. Okay, so then when does it matter? It's only when it's a team that people like and that they want to then maybe make some excuses for. And again, I'm not using the word excuses in a negative way. The Greenlaw injury for the 49ers was devastating. People said that the Chiefs lost to the Detroit Lions because Travis Kelce didn't play. That's a justifiable reason then. I won't necessarily wholeheartedly disagree with that, especially if we're talking about just the first game. I can get behind that. that if Travis Kelce played, that game would have went differently. So if that's the case, then we have to afford that to all the other circumstances. Their defense was decimated. I have no idea if they would have won. I mean, it's so easy to say, well, of course the Chiefs would win because we saw the Chiefs ended up winning the Super Bowl. But we really honestly have no idea. I honestly have no idea. I think the Chiefs probably still would have won, but I don't know. I don't know what that defense would have looked like. Maybe that offense was not a good offense. And maybe Fangio would have had a great way to contain Patrick Mahomes in that freezing cold weather. I mean, who knows? So I just love it just doesn't make sense to me.
Is saying
It was real cold.
And it's
I just say that's the whole
They
pass
can't play in
rush.
cold weather.
I understand, but that's 2 starters on the offensive line. That's all their sacks. That's all their linebackers. That's 2 guys in their safety that are starters. So I'd like to believe that if they're healthy and they repeat that production offensively, that sure, the Dolphins are a contender.
So listen, I don't think the loss. Brew and I think feel differently about how big of a loss Vic Fangio is, because I know you're one of the reasons you're optimistic about Philly is because they got him. It seemed like Miami couldn't, and the players in particular couldn't wait for him to move on. Maybe it just wasn't a fit, or maybe he's past his coordinating prime, if you will. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see this year.
No, I do think you can age out of being able to relate to players, and maybe the schemes change and defenses change. I do think that happens to certain guys. But to me, this is Brew. I think I agree with you because this really is a Tua question. Because I would believe this team were a contender. Quarterbacks that are.
I'm going to be a little all over the place with this one. But he says, like, the Miami Dolphins, Nick Wright says the Miami Dolphins are not a good organization and they're not a good team. That's his words, not mine. Okay? And now he's saying that organization couldn't wait to get rid of Vic Fangio. Well, if a bad organization can't wait to get rid of someone, doesn't that, like, why are you then saying, well, see, they didn't like him? Wouldn't that mean that a bad organization is doing a bad thing then? You understand what I'm saying? And again, I'm not saying that the Miami Dolphins are a poorly run organization or that they don't know how to construct a team or whatnot. Nick thinks that, not me. But that's just where Nick is then his own logic is completely flawed. It's just inconsistent.
I think universally considered good, but not considered top tier, like Jalen Hurts. With Jalen, I would believe this team is a contender. Not a top-tier contender, but with
it's the championship
Justin
game.
Herbert.
with
Justin Herbert.
Well, I think Herbert's even a tier above. I think with Herbert, they'd be considered top-tier contenders. I think Jared Goff with this team, if the offensive line stays together, I would consider them more of a contender. Dak Prescott. Maybe you disagree there. I would consider them more highly than I do now. And that is because despite the numbers, and I know Wilds can think I'm being unfair to the guy at times, despite the numbers, I think Tua is at best a league average quarterback. I think that's what he is.
At best.
I think he's around the 15th best quarterback in the league with ideal circumstances. Because I think his coach is super sharp, and we know how they like the weapons so much. They have 2 wide receivers on the list, Wild showed us.
But what do you want the guy to do?
I mean, Brew laid some of it out. Be able to play in a brisk breeze and to be able to be a good
They
team.
lost to the Chiefs, who are a dynasty.
He's 0-6 when
But what happened to
45
him last year, Wild? Last year they couldn't beat the best teams, and they lost to the Bills twice this year. The reason they were playing the Chiefs was because they lost to Buffalo at the.
But why doesn't he say that about the Dallas Cowboys then? Because the Cowboys had the exact same type of season where they played great against bad teams and played awful against playoff teams, and yet he still had Dak Prescott winning the MVP and going to the Super Bowl. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. And now he's going to say the Dolphins were in that situation because of their schedule, because of what they did, and yet the Dallas Cowboys were at home and got rocked by the Packers. So again, it's just the inconsistency of the logic.
Final game of the year.
Yeah, they should.
And they got stomped by a lot of the top teams. Baltimore, Buffalo. Like they didn't just
Baltimore
lose.
was in the AFC
they got
Championship.
Stomped though.
Right, but
a lot of teams lost to Baltimore, and a lot of teams lost
Yeah, the
to the
49ers.
Chiefs in the playoffs.
The
All the
49ers
teams lost to the Chiefs.
I'm sorry, I keep pausing it. The 49ers got stomped by the Ravens. Like a lot of teams did. So this isn't unique to the Miami Dolphins, they lost 2 great teams. They lost 2 great elite quarterbacks. And again, their defense was getting decimated little by little by little, especially in that final game of the season against the Bills going into Kansas City. So there was a lot of things that were happening.
Poor Tua is like, wow, I'm not elite. If I was a chef, okay, and my restaurant constantly was like, wow, most yards for a restaurant. Wow, most points for the restaurant. And I have you guys as restaurant reviewers like, yeah,
Constantly?
who's not good? The chef. I'm like, well, it sure seems like he's good.
How about once?
He threw,
What do you mean
led the league in
constantly?
yards for a chef, but he's no good.
What if that
Well,
restaurant?
he's got the best ingredients.
Every time just a regular person came there, they
We
went
don't
there,
have
but
outdoor
all-
seating.
Okay, all right.
In any event,
All right, that's the end of that clip. Also, for the record, the best chefs always talk about having the best ingredients matters more than anything. So, sorry, Wilds, your analogy is actually kind of flawed. But anyway, yeah, I mean, listen, just to answer that question directly, do I consider the Dolphins true contenders? I guess we have to ask the question of what does that mean by true contenders? Can they compete with the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Texans, right? Any of these other top teams in the AFC? I do think if the Dolphins are fully healthy, then yes. I think their margin of error is smaller than these other teams. So I give the other teams an edge because they have the ability to be a little bit more resilient. It seems like home field advantage is less important to them. And they can also play a more physical, gritty game, especially weather dependent, if need be. That it seems like the Dolphins need to have a little bit better circumstances for them to be able to succeed. But I think the Dolphins will have another great season. And again, I think if they stay healthy, I do think, because if they stayed healthy, I think they could have beaten the Bills that final game of the season. And if they were fully healthy going into the playoffs, they legit would have caused more trouble for Patrick Mahomes. That game would have been closer. How could it not have been closer when you're missing a bunch of key players on defense? We're then, if we can't admit that that game would have been closer, then we're essentially saying that those players don't matter. And if those players don't matter, then what actually matters for a team then? If the players don't matter, then what matters? Is it just the soul? Are we just rooting for the souls of the Miami Dolphins and the souls of the Kansas City Chiefs going head to head? Like, what is it? Obviously, the players and personnel matter. Like, of course it does. So, I think, who actually really knows? Honestly. So, I actually agree with, I forget that guy's name, the guy from Chicago. I do believe that they can be seen as legitimate, true contenders. And if they are fully healthy, because to me, that is also the question mark. Like, can they stay healthy? Can Tua stay healthy? And I know a lot of Miami Dolphins fans are annoyed with that question, but I'm sorry, it's a real question. And I'm a huge Tua fan. I want to see Tua succeed. I want Tua to get $200 million contract. I want him to have the life-changing money. I want him to have it all. I think Tua is awesome. He's someone who I truly, truly want to see succeed. And I just think that if the Dolphins are healthy, right, because I do trust their personnel and their coaching staff, obviously specifically their head coach, and I just think that I think they can do some damage in the playoffs. Like I just said, I think really that's the best way I can put it is their margin of error, their peak can be just as high as any of those other teams. I mean, we've seen that, right? Them putting up 1 million points. So their peak can be just as high, if not higher, than the Chiefs, the 49ers, the Ravens, the Eagles, any of these other teams. But their margin of error is a lot smaller because of what I've already just mapped out. And I think that's what it comes down to. So can they either stretch their margin of error a little bit more or just minimize their mistakes somehow, minimize the issues that they could run into, whether it be home field advantage, health, being down versus being up, getting an early lead versus being down by 10, right? Some of those other things. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? Do you consider the Dolphins a true contender? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.